Welcome to JonGetsGames. This is my variety vlog for the month of March, and I'm going to be covering several different topics as well as a bunch of different games, so let's jump right into it. The first thing I'd like to cover is general channel news and updates, and honestly nothing big happened over this last month. It was just a nice steady month for the channel. I got 6 videos out, which is really nice. The subscriber and viewer counts were a little under February, but still doing really good, better than I've ever done before, as long as you don't count February. And one big thing is that on my Patreon page, I now have 23 supporters, which is more than I've ever had. That comes out to about $60 a month when you take out fees and all that kind of stuff. And I've actually raised just shy of $600 on Patreon over the last 8 or so months, which is really awesome. I've used that to buy t-shirts and to buy more games so I can cover them on the channel. So I'm excited with how well the Patreon is doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that one goes in the future. So I think that pretty much sums up where the channel is. Let's now jump into the next section. And that would be questions and answers, although I only got one question over this last month, and that was from Spencer Kellis. He asked me, what are the best game mechanisms that are either fresh and new or at least recently revitalized? And this is a really big question. It's a really good question. I'll do my best to answer it from my personal perspective. And I did a good bit of thinking about this, and I am not able to come up with something new that you probably haven't heard before. Realistically, the biggest thing in new mechanisms in board gaming is narrative storytelling as you're playing the game. You know, the Pandemic Legacies and the Time Stories and Above and Below that also came out last year. These are games that have good mechanisms behind them, but are really all about getting you into a story much more than just reading the first paragraph in the rulebook, trying to figure out, oh, what you're supposed to be doing, and then jumping into the mechanics of your standard game. And I really like that. But there are a couple other mechanisms that I've seen get much better over the last year or so, certainly much more prevalent. I don't know if they're necessarily new, but one of those is dice pool drafting. Actually, just pool drafting in general. I've talked about this on my channel before, so I am being a bit of a broken record here. But you have games where you either roll dice and put them in the middle of a table and then people grab from that pool, or you maybe deal out a bunch of cards. And I love that mechanism, and it seems like more and more games are doing that, especially last game. I haven't necessarily seen a swath of those for 2016 that have really jumped out at me, but in 2015 you had things like Elysium, you have My Village, you've got Seven Wonders Duel, and a bunch of others that I cannot come up with off the top of my head, and I just love having the randomness of what the dice are rolled or what the cards are that show on the middle of the table, but then you can only take specific ones, then you have to figure out what your opponents want. It's just a wonderful mechanism. So to sum it up, I think that great thematic storytelling with narrative gameplay mechanics is a really big thing recently, and then just pool drafting in general. I love how big those two things have gotten in board games, and I'm excited to see the games that come out in the future that really utilize those. If you've got a question you'd like me to answer on next month's variety vlog, please email it to me at jongetsgames@gmail.com or send it over on Twitter or Facebook or comment on this video. There's a whole bunch of ways you can get that question over. All right, now it's time to talk about a game that I'm really excited about, and that would be Mystic Vale. I had not heard about this game at all until about 2 weeks ago when the coverage for the GAMA trade show started going through, and I started seeing pictures of it, and I got really intrigued immediately because in this game, you have a bunch of transparent cards where only a small section of the card has printed text or graphics on it. And what you're doing is you are crafting cards as you're playing the game by stacking multiple of these transparent cards into a sleeve so that certain sections show up on the different cards. So at the beginning of the game, you, I believe, start with 20 cards, and many of them are completely blank. They're just a card in a sleeve. But as you're playing the game, you buy more of these cards and you slide it in, and you will overlap these cards on top of each other. So by the end of the game, you might have like 3 or 4 cards stuck into a single sleeve that is in your deck, and you never add more cards to your deck. You are just constantly improving the cards, and they've got engine-y stuff on it to like get points for doing this or that. They've got lots of buying power to let you buy more cards to upgrade the previous cards you have, but they also have decay symbols on them where if you draw too many of them in this push your luck style at the, I believe, beginning of your turn or maybe right at the end, well, that doesn't matter. If you draw too many of them, you bust essentially, and you get to do much less on your turn. So the big reason I'm excited about this is the card crafting idea. That is a new mechanism. I haven't seen that before. There have definitely been games with transparent cards in the past, but usually that's been from a thematic art standpoint where it like kind of like looks cool, but from this perspective, you are literally, you need these cards to be transparent so you can look through the top 2 and see the text printed on the one that's 3 cards down, and that is just fascinating. But when you add into the fact that I really enjoy push your luck games in general and engine building games, this one has me super intrigued. It might end up not working for some reason or another because it is such a new mechanic, but I've got to give this one a try. It's getting me really excited, and I also heard that Mystic Vale is the first game using this mechanism, but they are actively working on a more complicated game using that mechanism that'll be coming out a year from now. So it almost seems like Mystic Vale is a tester for the market. Like they're going to put this out, see how the mechanism works, maybe even see how it balances out and use that as like a really big published game version of prototype playtesting of a mechanic that will be in a bigger game later on, and they can make sure that it works better for that. Either way, I'd love to give this one a shot. I'm pretty excited about it. All right, now let's talk about the games of note that I was able to play over the last month. Specifically, these are the ones that I feel like I have more than usual to say about, or they were special for one reason or another. So let's start it off with the Legacy expansion. So this is the 5 Families expansion to Legacy: The Testament of Duke de Cracy, and I gave that a favorable review last year. It's a interesting worker placement / tableau building game where you start off as the head of a family and you go through 3 different generations, ending the game with, I believe, great-grandchildren. And as you are marrying people into your family and having kids, you are kind of building an engine. They will play off each other based off of their different nationalities. It's a neat little Euro game. So what the expansion does is it gives the game 5 different asymmetric families that you get to play. I mean, it's called 5 Families, right? But it has an interesting take on asymmetry, because usually when you think about an asymmetric faction in a board game, it will let you do something for cheaper or maybe give you a special ability that you can use throughout the whole game. But the way this expansion works is that it gives you a deck of cards which are your cousins, as well as maybe some decrees and special actions. And after every single turn, you draw 3 of them, and then you pick one and you have to offer it to all of your opponents. And if none of them take it, then you get to use it. So it's a little bit weird. You have this asymmetric deck, but you have to give the opportunity to your opponents. But if they want that card, they have to pay you in favor tokens. And then you can spend these favor tokens to get bonus actions as you're playing the game, which might let you take 2 turns in a row, get special bonus actions, or maybe you could just take money or friends from that person who gave you the favor, essentially cashing in on those favors. So it's a really interesting thematic twist. That particular part of the game, I was able to play this once. It was a 3-player game. Now, the 2 other people I played with had never played Legacy at all before, so it was a little bit of a slow experience, and I don't want to blame the expansion for that at all. I liked the idea of these cards, but it felt a little bit clunky in that after every single turn you had to do this pull 3 cards, decide which one, and then offer it to all of your opponents thing. I like where it's going, and I don't have a definitive opinion on it yet. I definitely want to play this a couple more times before I will have one, but it seemed like it might not be worth the extra amount of time that it added into the game, but I'm really conflicted because I like the idea of it. The other thing that this game brought in is birth events. So if you know anything about Legacy, the base game, you have these complications at birth cards that can happen when you're having kids, and you never know if it's going to happen, and if it does happen, then either the baby or the mother dies, and you have to decide which one. It's a very dark thematic aspect to the game that also puts interesting decisions into the game, where you need to decide how badly you want that kid, and if the mom dies, well, can you remarry? And there's all sorts of stuff that goes along with that. In the expansion, you get rid of all those complication at birth cards, and instead you put these 20 or so birth event cards into the deck. And these are interesting because they actually have a different back side to the card. So when the top card on the kid's deck is this other kind of side, you will know you're about to go into a birth event. And most of them are not good or bad. They're very neutral. They will almost always cost you something, but if they cost you something, they will almost always get you something as well. You might get kind of a bonus action, but you lose some money or a victory point or 2, or that kind of thing. And a great part about it is they're very thematic. It's like the father gets drafted to go to war, or suddenly there's a long-lost sister to your family who says that they are part of your family, and what do you do with that? There are a bunch of different ones, and I love the thematic twist that they bring into the game. And I liked the complications at birth mechanism in the base game, but I really like this thematic twist with having the birth events. I think it's less painful, especially if you draw them early in the game. And yeah, I just really like that addition to the game in general. The expansion also brings in some new asymmetric endgame goal cards, which I like. So in general, I have a favorable opinion of the expansion so far. I do want to get it played a couple more times, specifically with players who have played the base game already, so I can really judge to see how those different family decks turn out. The next game I want to talk about is a bit older. It came out in 2010, and that's Firenze. This was picked up by a good friend of mine at a board game auction last year, and I finally got to play it just this last month, and I really liked several of the things that are going on here. Thematically, what you're doing is building towers in Italy, I believe, and mechanically, there are several very cool things going on. First of all, you have an action draft row where you have a bunch of cards that have personalities on them or maybe events, and they all go in a row, and it gets more expensive to grab the ones later on in the row. Well, we've seen that 100 times in board games. As you pick out the cards, they get cheaper. Okay, well, we've seen that 100 times as well, but the interesting part about it is it has an incentivization structure for making it more painful to take the later on cards, because what happens is the resources in the game come in the form of these colored tower tokens that kind of stack on top of each other because you're trying to build towers. Well, every card that comes out in the row is going to have 4 random towers put on it, but if you want to buy a card that is farther down the row than the most left, you have to put a resource of your choice down on every single card that you skip. So each card that you skipped is going to get an extra resource, and it will incentivize those cards being taken by other players more as the game goes on. Some of these cards are just bad. They're just really not good for you, like a warehouse fire or something like that. You're going to lose stuff. But as people avoid doing that, they put more and more things on top of it to the point where there will be enough resources on there that it'll be worth it to the person to take the bad event penalty to get all these resources. And I love that in pretty much all board games. I love it when you take an action and the things that weren't taken get more incentivization stacked on top of it, but this adds an extra layer with the player being able to choose what kind of resources to put down on there. Oh, really, really cool stuff. But then when you also look at the other side of the game, it's kind of an area majority thing where you are building these towers and then putting scoring tokens down on these towers on the main board that show you how many points you get. And once somebody builds like a 4-level green tower, then nobody else can. And you need to build a level 3 or level 5 tower. And the bigger the tower, the more points you're going to get. But it has a really cool idea where you need to spend resources in order to build these towers up. And if you ever have a tower that is currently being built up and you don't add anything onto it on a turn, that whole tower gets destroyed, which is a really painful thing. When I first was taught the rules, I thought that sounded really bad, but it, I think, only happened once or twice in the game. What it means is you really have to plan ahead and decide, will I have the ability to get another green block to put it on there, or do I just cash out now and get some points? So I think I've talked about this one enough. I am really interested in it. I want to try this one again. I have no idea how much it is out there. I don't really need to buy it because a really good friend of mine owns it, but it's got some fascinating stuff going on, some things that I really enjoy in board games. And if you haven't heard about it before, I would strongly recommend you at least look into it a little bit if any of this sounds appealing at all. Next up is a very new game. This is Kodama the Tree Spirits, which just came out. I think I got it last week from the Kickstarter fulfillment. And in this game, you are growing a tree by placing branch cards down onto a main trunk that you start with. And it has a really cool idea in that you kind of organically branch these trees out. You don't put the cards so that they're butting each other like in an orthogonal or diagonal perspective. You overlay them in a almost haphazard way so that the tree organically grows in different directions based off of the decisions that you're making as you're playing the game. The gameplay itself is really simple. You're going to place 12 branches down onto your tree before the end of the game, and once you place 4 branches, you'll put a secret scoring card down. You have a hidden hand of cards with some tree spirits, and they are kind of guiding you in different ways for how you're going to build your tree. The one might say, I'm going to give you 4 victory points for every card that's touching your base trunk of your tree. Another one might say, I'm going to give you 2 victory points per symbol of these 2 symbols, whichever one's less. That kind of stuff, which will guide how you are grabbing these branches and putting them down on your tree. There is a basic scoring kind of set collection thing where you're trying to get consecutive runs of different symbols on your branches. So like disregarding those secret scoring cards and all that, you were just trying to get like all your little glow bugs to match up and all your little mushrooms to match up, because that's going to give you points as well. So mechanically, I like pretty much everything that's going on in this game. Like when I just look at it and I read the rules, it's like, this looks like a really fun little game. And so we played a 4-player game of it just last weekend, and it did not go over amazingly well. It was a bit of an average lukewarm experience for everyone on the table. I think I enjoyed it more than most of the other players, and the reason for this was a perceived imbalance issue with those hidden cards that get dealt out at the beginning of the game. Everybody gets 4 of these cards, that's all you're going to get, and you're going to play them 3 times during the game. Now, I'm not saying that there is an imbalance between the cards, but there was a perceived one, and that perception of imbalance really tanked the impression of the game for a couple of people around the table who were really trying to do the best they could with the cards they had, and then we would all reveal our cards, and they would score like maybe 5 or 6 points, and then myself and another player would score like 15 or 16 points. And after that happened twice, they said, let me see the rest of your cards. And we kind of all showed all of the cards. We looked around the table, and they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know there were cards that had 4 points per whatever it is even on them. And we looked at their cards, and it really did seem like they had a tougher hill to climb in order to get similar points to what we were getting. Now, I've only played the game once, so this is not a condemnation of balance in the game. It might be very well balanced, but that perception of the imbalance there made those players who felt like they got really much worse starting hands, they just had much less fun as they were playing it because they felt like they were trying a lot harder to get to where we were at. And the person who won was not me, it was a person on my left who also seemed to get really high power cards, and then I took second place, and those two other players were a little bit farther behind. So I'm looking forward to giving this one more plays because I really do like the ideas that are in the game. I am curious to see how the balance of those hidden tree spirit cards will play out as I'm playing the game. I'm honestly a little surprised that the game doesn't have like a hand drafting variant even, where you get your 4 cards and then you choose one and pass it, so that you can have the players around the table do a little bit of self-bouncing as well. But anyway, I think I've talked about this one enough. It's a really neat, beautiful looking game on the table, and I'm looking forward to getting more tries of the game to see how it plays with more experiences. Next up is Troll, which is another push your luck game from Oink Games. They're the people who made Deep Sea Adventure, which is a push your luck game, as well as Fake Artist Goes to New York, and a whole bunch of other games that all come in these adorable little boxes. They come from Japan, and I've enjoyed the experience I've gotten out of those little boxes before, and I was happy to see that Victory Point Cafe in Berkeley, California had a copy to play so that I could try it without spending another like $30, $35 on it. I enjoy these games, but they do seem a little expensive to get them shipped over to California. So in this push your luck game, what you are is thieves trying to get gems out of a cave before the trolls come and smack you down and cause you to not get any gems. You are trying to steal the most gems you can. And it has a really cool mechanic where people are bidding a certain number of, I guess, gems that they're going to steal out of the cave. And I suppose thematically, the more gems you get, the slower you are. So I might put like a 2 down, and then the person on my left might put a 3, and then the next person might put a 5. And then at the end of the round, once everybody's put a chip down, you add up all those numbers, but you go sequentially. So you would start with me and you say 2, and then you go to the next person, they have a 3, so you add those together, you get 5. And at this point, you flipped over, you know what the troll value is. Let's say it's a 6. Well, 5 is less than 6, that's fine, but you go to the next player who put a 5 down, and 5 plus 5 is 10. You've gone over 6, and that person who caused the value to go over the threshold for the troll, they get smacked down, and they don't get any gems at all, and the people who are underneath get to run away scot-free with the gems. It has an interesting thing going on, though, where the first person who chooses a number gets to know what the troll is. They get to peek and see what it is and then choose a number, and everybody else has to make a decision. They either do a cowardly move where they also look at the troll and then they choose a tile, or they could not look at the troll, put a tile down, and if they're able to get out of the dungeon, they will get double the amount of points for doing that. And I really like how all of this came together. It's a neat little game that comes in this little box, and there's a whole bunch of decisions there. It's got push your luck, and it's also got bluffing, because one person looks at the thing and they put a tile down. Maybe they're trying to goad people into doing big numbers because they put a big number down. They figure, oh, the troll must be a 13. Or maybe it's not. Maybe the troll is like a 5, and they put their 4 down knowing that they'd be safe, but nobody else would. So there's a little bit of mind games going on here, and I was really impressed with it. I don't know if I'll run out to buy a copy of it, but I am looking forward to giving it more plays at that board game cafe at Victory Point, and we'll see what I end up doing. I might end up snagging a copy of this if I'm able to find it for like $20 or less at some point in the future. Alright, now we've got Above and Below, which was a Kickstarter that came out last year that I ended up not backing because I was a little worried about it, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to play the copy that they have at Victory Point Cafe. Really enjoy being able to play these games without having to buy them before I can try them. And this is a pretty cool game. I really enjoyed my one play of it, where in this game you have these Euroi things going on, where you have these villagers in your village, and you are going to get new villagers, and the villagers will build buildings, and the buildings will give you abilities that might make certain actions more lucrative or unlock new actions. There's a whole bunch of kind of engine building things that you're doing there, but then you can send your villages down into the caverns below your village, and you will do a choose your own adventure style thing. You will roll a die, and then somebody gets out this big book and they flip to like number 195, and then they read you a little story. They might tell you about a crotchety old man that you see wandering off in the distance. Do you chase him down, or do you just ignore him and go in a different direction? And based off of your decision, you will end up rolling dice to see how successful you are. The villagers you send down there will have different modifiers. Some of them are just better at exploring than others, I suppose, and then you will get benefits from it. The benefits that you get are not terribly thematic. You usually don't have a great end to the story. If you chase down the old man or something like that, you might, I don't know, squeeze some money out of them and then you just get a resource. It doesn't have a great narrative ending to it. Usually you just get a resource or two, but I thought it was really a neat thing going on. The game definitely seemed to be motivating you to get lots of villagers and then to do lots of exploration to really enjoy that aspect of the game where you're like reading out the thing, and sometimes you might be reading a story and you're like, no, don't open the thing, but if you open it up, suddenly you expect it to be bad and now it's a good thing. And to a certain degree there's a replayability issue there, because if you play it again and you happen to get to that same exact narrative in the book, you will know how it goes. But man, there are a lot of entries in that book, so I don't think that'll happen anytime soon. All in all, I was really impressed with the game. It has beautiful art, which is not surprising. This is from Red Raven Games. All of their games have this similar art aesthetic because they are designed, published, and illustrated by the same man, Ryan Laukat. And so I just like the consistency that you see with the art styles through all of their games. And I think I enjoyed this one more than any of his other games that I played, like 8 Minute Empire and Empires of the Void. This was a really good experience. I look forward to giving it a shot again. And now for the last game that I'll be covering, and it's a little bit of an old one as well. This is Thebes the Tomb Raiders. I got the Kickstarter for this, I think about 1.5 years ago, and it's technically a card game version of another game called Thebes, which came with the same Kickstarter, but I really like the card game version of it. What you're doing in this game is you're archaeologists trying to excavate and find cool stuff in the ruins of like the pyramids and ancient Greece and all that kind of thing. What you are doing in the game, though, mechanically, is it has this time track action system, which I really enjoy in games, where everything you do costs time, and you go around a circular track displaying that, and whoever is farthest back on time takes their turn. So if you take really efficient turns and you're quite far back, you could take several turns in a row, or you could spend a bunch of time, do a big thing, and then probably skip out on several different turns. It's a really cool decision that you have there, and what you're doing in the game is you are getting more knowledgeable about the 4 different dig sites, and the more knowledgeable you are, the less time you need to spend in order to get more stuff out of excavating them. So it has this great buildup as you are getting more and more knowledge, which comes in the form of these little book cards that you put in front of you. And then once you say have like 7 or 8 knowledge in the purple, you say, all right, I'm gonna go dig on the purple site. You have to spend a contract in order to do that. You only get 1 of each of these for each of the zones in a game, but you could buy more later. And then you say how much time you want to spend between like 1 and 12 weeks, which are, you know, essentially each time increment is 1 week. And then you draw that many random cards from the stack of potential gems, or also potential like rubble, and all the ones that are not rubble are victory point cards that you get to keep, and then you can end up curating them into a museum or put on exhibitions. There's a bunch of different things you can do here in the game, and I've played it several times now, and I've really enjoyed it. Every time I played it, definitely brings across this archaeologist digging, kind of finding vibe as you're playing the game. Like, you could do an early excavation if you want to try and get in there and be the first to potentially get those really big victory point cards, but you will probably only be drawing 2 or 3 cards and spending a bunch of time. But if you wait, then once you have like maybe 8 or 10 knowledge in that section, you might spend much less time and draw way more cards and have a much better shot at getting really good stuff. Now, there is randomness here. You could draw really poorly. You could draw 6 cards and they could all be rubble. That's really unlikely to happen, but it definitely could happen, which thematically does kind of make sense. If you're just digging into the ground, doesn't matter how much you know about that spot, you might just dig in the wrong area. So I think that that is forgivable. The game only lasts a little over an hour, so it doesn't really overstay its welcome, especially if you end up running into a bunch of bad luck. Anyway, I suggest you give this one a look if you haven't heard of it before. I never actually played the Thebes board game, but I read the rules, and honestly, I just like the look of the card game much better. It's a much smaller package, and it seems to do the same thing. So yeah, I really enjoyed playing the game. I'm looking forward to just continually getting that one out every month or 2 going forward. So that wraps up this variety vlog. Again, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer in future vlogs, please comment down below or email it over to JonGetsGames@gmail.com, and I will put it into the next vlog. So if you'd like to see more videos like this one, as well as in-depth board game reviews and full game playthroughs, please subscribe to my channel. Also, you can directly support the channel at patreon.com/JonGetsGames. Thanks for watching.